will only add. It's good that it's allowed. That's a, that rule of thumb. I always worry I'm forgetting something. But I'm not. Okay. Good evening. Welcome to the Village Council regular meeting of February 13th, 2024. Calling that meeting to order, I'd like to begin by asking Reverend Matt Stillman of the Trinity Christian Church, which is a neighbor of Village Hall right down the block here, to please lead us in an invocation.
Pray with me. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, God of all nations and all people, this evening we ask that you would bless us with the gifts of life and health, love and friendship, wisdom and inspiration. Despite our differences, you have gathered us here to work for the improvement of our community. We thank you for your grace and for the labor of those who have made themselves available for the benefit of their neighbors. Pour out your grace on us, that your perfect peace might reign in every heart and every business and every school and every home and every church here in Pinehurst. Fulfill the deepest hopes and dreams of those who founded our village to be a beacon of goodwill in this time and place. Enable each one of us to fulfill our calling in this world. Where we are ignorant, enlighten us. Where we are prideful, humble us. Where we are weak, strengthen us. Where we are broken, heal us. And we pray all of these things in the name of Jesus, who for our sakes, though he was rich, became poor. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. And I'd like to call forward Miss Ainsley Bear, a fourth grader at the Sandhills Classical Christian School and a resident of Pinehurst, along with her parents and grandparents. So Ainsley, please come up to that microphone, and I ask everyone to rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Speak into the microphone.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much, Ainsley. Thank you, Reverend Stillman. All right. Well, let us begin the evening, as we usually do, with some reports from the village manager and members of the council. So I'll ask Village Manager Sanborn to kick us off.
All right, thank you, Patrick. I'd like to comment on two things. The first is our fiscal year 24 road resurfacing work is about to get started, minus what was already done downtown, obviously. So if our residents see crews out doing more marking work, it's not associated with the effort to put in fiber optic lines in some of our neighborhoods. That's what's going on. So we expect that marking work is intended to mark places that need to be repaired to start within about a week or two, and then the repair work to start probably near March 1st in that time frame. And then once the repair work is done, the final resurfacing of the roads that were selected for FY24 will commence. The second is I'd like to call attention to this nice little item, and some of you may have seen this in the paper or on our social media postings or otherwise, but this is the ETC Institute's Leading the Way Award. Now, the ETC Institute is is the firm that we've used for many years to do our annual resident and business surveys. This is tied to the resident survey results. And the leading the way reward is in recognition of the Village of Pinehurst being in the top 10% across the United States in 3 key areas, those being the value that our residents feel they receive from taxes and fees paid. And then number 2 is the quality of customer service provided by village employees. And then number 3 is the quality of the services that our employees provide. Another interesting thing to note on that is that we were also recognized for scoring above the national average by more than 30% in 16 different areas. And then finally, I'd also call attention to the fact that we have all recognized in studying our results from this past year that we saw a little bit of a downward trend across the board in a lot of our results. It's interesting that while that is true, we won this award this year and we didn't win it last year. And that's kind of consistent with some feedback we got from ETC early last fall, where they commented to us that across the board, they were seeing, across the United States, more downward results than upward results for whatever reason. It's the climate in the country or mood of the country or something, but it might help to explain why we've seen some of those numbers dip. So across the board, we have dropped, and even in these 3 key areas that I just mentioned that this award is in recognition of, we dropped between 2 and 5% going from FY22 to FY23. But we won this recognition this year and didn't the previous year. That concludes my report.
Well, congratulations to you and the staff for a really good year. And you can read more about that on the website. We have a photograph of the department heads along with the award and some background information. So let me turn to Dr. Morgan. Do you have anything you want to add?
Thank you. Yeah, a couple things. First of all, just congratulations on the Leading the Way award. You don't win these awards by all of a sudden jumping on the spotlight and doing something good for a single day. You do it for consistent, long-term professional activities and efforts that go on there. So as far as I look at that, that's a good consistency award of saying great service and great efforts across our entire staff. I think it also highlights, and Jeff, your comments there, is the importance of benchmarking. We have to look at what other areas are doing and see how we relate in correlation with that. So congratulations to the staff, congratulations to leadership, and thank you from the entire village here. Next on there is the Central Pines Regional Council. There's a meeting that was on January this year, and basically the topics that were covered were the Triangle Water Supply Partnership and also the Triangle Area Water Supply Monitoring Partnership, our project. Not a lot of actions were taken on there. They did approve the budget for that. And they also are updating now the board member contact form. They're also going to be offering a media training class for elected officials in there from that. So that is all I have for my reports at this point in time, other than April is the next Central Pines meeting.
Okay, thank you. John.
2 things, I think. First of all, I met yesterday with Phil Wirtz, the CEO of the Convention Visitors Bureau. That's one of our partners and collaborators to whom I am assigned. It's my first time meeting him. We had I think, very good discussion. A bunch of interesting things going on over there that I think you're going to hear more about in the not-too-distant future publicly. And they have their first quarterly meeting of their board of directors is March 15th, I think, somewhere in March, and I will be at that. Secondly, just to remind people, I want to get the dates in front of me. January 25th, the Moore County Board of Commissioners did a listening session at Pinecrest High School as they are contemplating the revision to their land use plan. They have a second meeting tonight, 5:30 at Union Pines High School, and Thursday, which I don't believe I'll be able to make, and Thursday at 5:30 also at Northmore High School in Robbins, trying to be sure that they get out around to as many of the communities as they can. They noted after the first meeting in Pinecrest, they had not heard from anyone from the fort or anyone, frankly, from the military community. And they're trying to be sure that they reach out to as many groups as possible as they contemplate their land use plan. So I will plan to be there on Thursday night. I think that's it.
Barbara?
Thank you. I have two things. The first is that at the suggestion of the village staff, I did go up to Carthage to take a look at the Moore County Library up there, and we will have more about that a little bit later on this evening. Second thing is I went to the Beautification Committee's first meeting of the new year. It was my first meeting ever. They did a review of the budget, the forthcoming budget, and had an impressive list of events for the coming year. Janet has asked me to share 3 items with you. One is that the Bollard Street lights have been installed on Dogwood Road from Holly to the Pinecrest. This improves pedestrian safety and was part of the downtown amenity plan. Secondly, a new storage building near the new police station houses 100-plus holiday wreaths with new racking and a new safety ladder. The facility is shared with the fire department. Planning is underway for the 2024 Warren H. Manning Award. You may remember that from last year. That recognizes sustainable landscaping that enhances the village with native plants, water conservation, and Manning design principles. And finally, an item that is on their list for the coming year is being able to successfully address somehow House Bill 259, which calls for native plants, those from North Carolina and southeastern states only, to be planted in DOT right-of-ways, which is a critical issue to be addressed, but they are on it. And that's it. Thank you.
Councilman Farrell?
I don't have any official duties to report, but I'd like to just mention a little community action that happens on the first Sunday of every month downtown in the morning, and that is a informal gathering of car enthusiasts, which quite honestly is quite impressive, to tell you the truth. And for any month, you may see an eclectic set of cars ranging from pre-war real antiques to more modern supercars, and the enthusiasts gather and discuss it. It's not formal, it's not managed, it's not organized, there's no awards, but it's quite an interesting event. So if you happen to be going to or from church and want to stop there and have a cup of coffee and take a look at some of these really impressive vehicles, I'd recommend doing so.
Thank you. A few items to mention. First of all, I'd like to remind all our residents that there are 3 neighborhoods on the Neighborhood Advisory Committee that are still have vacancies. And they're Pinehurst South, East Midland, which is all the way out to Walker Station, and Linden Road West towards Cotswold. So those who are here or are listening, I see.
Linden Road West is full now.
It is full.
The first 2, yeah.
Okay, I went to the website today, so we need to update that. So those Pinehurst South and East Midland are still vacant. So please step up and join the Neighborhood Advisory Committee. It's there for our residents so that we can have input and they can hear things about what's going on firsthand in the village. 2, I did attend the Moore County Economic Development Partnership meeting last week, and they elected a new chairman. John May is stepping down, and Adam Kiker, local resident who's with LKC Engineering, the managing partner there, will become the chairman. So we have a new chairman we'll be working with. Then I'd also like to remind folks something that I was reminded on, that effective January 1, the Village of Pinehurst will require all permit applications to be submitted electronically on the online permit center. And I've been doing that for a year or 2, but there are still some people who are not submitting or think they can just come in and submit applications elsewise. So And that was effective a couple of years ago, so just sort of a general reminder, please use our website and submit electronically through the online permit center. Lastly, I want to remind people that tomorrow is Valentine's Day. And I'd also like to remind you that the rumor of Taylor Swift being here tonight to appear is a rumor. She will not be here. So having covered those items, we can now go to the consent agenda unless someone else has something else they'd like to mention. No. Okay. On the consent agenda, we have 2 items. All these items that listed are considered routine or have been discussed at length in previous meetings and will be enacted by one motion. No separate discussion will be held unless requested by a member of the village council. So we have the January 23rd, 2024 regular meeting minutes, the January 23rd, 2024 work session minutes. And we have approval of the revised 2024 meeting schedule. We made an adjustment for our village council meeting around the U.S. Open in June. So I'll entertain a motion, or if anyone has anything they'd like to comment on.
I move to approve all the items listed and considered routine on the consent agenda.
Second.
Okay, a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we have ended the consent agenda. Thank you. Now we'll move to item 5. That is a consider resolution 24-08 appointing Mr. Jimmy Duncan to the Planning and Zoning Board and the Board of Adjustment. I believe Mr. Duncan and Jeremy Hooper is here. Please come forward. Jeremy, go ahead.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members, for hearing us tonight as we recommend Mr. Jimmy Duncan to fill the open seat that we have on the Planning and Zoning Board. We interviewed Mr. Duncan about 3 weeks ago, Jeff, Alex, and I, and he was able to show us a couple traits that he has that we feel would be very helpful to the Planning and Zoning Board. Some of his experience in his work career, 34 years with Duke Power. Much of that was dedicated towards regulations, ordinances, reading and writing those as such, and deciphering those. And what we really appreciated about Mr. Duncan during that interview was he was able to very clearly and directly, show us how he would reach back into the PDO, and in fact, how he had done so with some of our recent applications, and came up with his thought process of how he would approach those. And we felt that after him showing us that would be something that's pretty helpful to what we do in our PDO. And I'll let Mr. Duncan get into a little bit more of that in detail, answer any questions that you have, but he is a long-standing resident here of Pinehurst, here in the village, and we hope that you accept our recommendation. Jimmy, do you have anything you would like to add to that?
Not really. My thing is, we are residents of the village. My wife and I have no plan on going anywhere. Understand that Pinehurst is going to see growth and is going to see change in the years to come. And throughout my career, I can tell you I have always tried to put myself in a position that if there's change coming, I at least like to have a seat at the table as those changes come. So,
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you for stepping up and applying. It's a good example for other citizens. There are vacancies on some of our boards and commissions. Please apply if you think you can add some value to what's going on here in our village government. So I have no other questions for you. I'll open it up to my fellow council members here. Dr. Morgan?
I've got no questions, but thank you for volunteering.
John?
No, I took the opportunity to interview him separately. We had a very good dialogue and actually uncovered another skill of his that beyond this particular commission may be useful as we go forward to, as staff goes forward to reviewing the PDO. So no further questions.
Thank you. Barbara?
No further questions, but thank you for applying.
And I'm going to ask the member of this council who is a former member of the Planning and Zoning Board himself. He might have a question.
Well, we don't have any questions. Jimmy and I had a brief discussion about the reading material, which he's going to work on, which is the PDO and the comp plan and form-based codes and the village small area plans, and he'll have all that done, within a week or so. I'm sure some late night reading would be very helpful. And good luck with that, Jimmy.
Thank you, Jimmy. Jeremy, I'll entertain a motion.
I'd like to do that. I move to approve Resolution 2408, appointing Mr. Jimmy Duncan to the Planning and Zoning Board and Board of Adjustment, effective February 13th, 2024, to serve at the pleasure of the council until the end of his term on February 28, 2026.
Second?
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, hearing none. Opposed? Congratulations, Jimmy Duncan. Welcome.
Thank
All
you.
right, appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you, Jeremy. Item 6, I'll ask if our fire chief and our police chief, I see them approaching, can provide a presentation on the biannual report that each of them do regarding what's happening in their world and our world here in the village of Pinehurst. I see we have the fire department up on the screen, so you draw the short straw, chief.
The short straw.
Go
Right.
ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. We appreciate the opportunity to give you some
Please pull the
insight
mic a little
into the-
closer so they can pick it up.
to give you some insight into the operation of the fire department for the first 6 months of fiscal year '24. So as you can see, I think I'm adjusted now. As you can see, we've had 1,226 calls for assistance, and just to give you some I guess, perspective of that, fiscal year '26, which was the first fiscal year that we started responding to medical calls, we had 443 at this point in the year, or at the end of the calendar year. So that represents about a 277% increase in our response. The calls make up, 895 of the calls are in Pinehurst. That's about 73%. In our fire district or Taylortown's 147. Assisting other agencies, which are mutual or automatic aid calls, it's 184, or about 15% of the calls. And of the calls that we respond to, there's about 25%, 24.55% overlap in those calls. Now, that doesn't mean we don't respond to the additional call. It just means that we have something else going on that we're dispatched to, and an additional call comes in. So we're assigning other resources to handle that. And the types of calls for service that we have, medical and rescue make up 47% of that. Medical or EMS assist is about 38%, rescue is about 9%. Fire-related or 100 series calls is 4% of our response, and then other fire-related calls are the 49%. One thing I will point out, that the 18% for false alarms and false calls, that doesn't necessarily mean it's a lot of what those are automatic alarm activations, and they activate because of smoke. They activate because of construction dust or steam. It's not because of malfunctions in the system or malicious call types. So it does call us to and that's through automatic means, but that does call us to the residents or business to help them resolve that situation. Our busiest day of the week is Friday at 2 p.m. So that's between 2 o'clock and 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Our required inspections that we've completed is 566. 106 of those are on the state mandated inspection schedule. The others are plan reviews, inspections of sprinkler systems, fire alarm systems. And when I say sprinkler systems, I mean fire sprinkler systems, fire alarm systems, hood suppression systems, or things of that nature that we are required to do by code as well. We're also involved with the TRC, so we review plans and developmental plans and things when fire code is applicable. Public awareness contacts, we have 32,728. Those are any events that we participate in that we hand out stickers, pencils, fire helmets, fire extinguisher training classes that we offer, CPR or first aid, car seat checks that we do at the fire station, and we're a permanent car seat check station for Safe Kids, North Carolina. Yellow Dot program and File of Life as well. We also host a junior fire academy each summer and have attempted on a couple of occasions to start a Citizens Fire Academy. So we're trying to revamp that to see if we can get more interest in that. Staff training, in-house training is 3,377 hours for the first half of the year, and those are basically continuing education classes to maintain current certifications such as firefighter, emergency medical technician, hazardous material response, other state certifications, or things to just maintain skills. So knots is a big thing, and if I don't do that frequently, I can't remember how to tie the different knots we need to know. That's something we do with our staff as well, just to keep them fresh and current. Advanced training are things such as attending the National Fire Academy, which is in Emmitsburg, Maryland. Most of that training is free. We just have to buy the meal ticket for them to attend. New certification programs that are offered through the state, and just further developmental programs for our staff to have them ready for that next level or help them reach what their goals are. The one thing that I'll update that's on here, and I'll point out and thank my staff for their efforts in this, we've got a dangerous job. And as of yesterday, we've made it 4 years without a lost time accident. Doesn't mean we haven't had accidents or injuries, but they haven't lost time. They haven't been severe enough to do that. So it really takes an effort to do that. So I appreciate my staff doing that for us. And I'll be glad to answer any questions if you have any.
I'll start with Dr. Morgan. Go ahead.
Yeah, I've got a couple. First of all, congratulations on the safety.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Chief Cole. You have service calls. Then below that, it says a good intent call. Why don't you just tell us what a good intent call is and kind of give us some examples of that?
Okay, a good intent call would be a call because of smoke in a building. So the way we classify calls, we're dispatched a certain way. We may be dispatched to a structure fire. When we arrive, it's because of a fan belt motor or fan belt that slips that causes smoke in the residence. It's not actually a fire, but it creates the appearance that there's a problem, obviously, that the people need assistance with. Good intent would be something like that. It could be that we're called because of an outside fire and someone has an outdoor fireplace, or they have a grill on their back porch that's causing smoke. So the intent is that they think there's a fire or a problem. When we get there, there's not actually the problem that they suspect.
Okay, excellent. Appreciate that. Your presentation, a lot of great news that's on there. And again, good job with all that. But are there any problems, anything you're losing sleep over, any problems that we need to know about that might need action from us?
I think that what we experience with the growth in call volume, or the increase in call volume and the overlapping calls, and like I said, that doesn't necessarily mean that we can't manage the calls. It may mean that we're delayed at times. The people that we depend on, the outside agencies, even the EMS system, they're delayed as well because they're seeing the same increases in call volume as the population grows and traffic increases. So response times are something that is a concern for me. We obviously do the best that we can with the resources that we have.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is that the response time, basically secondary to growth, and like other places on there, is what the concerns are.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. That's all my questions. Appreciate it.
John Taylor.
Just a couple of things to see if I recall correctly from either the onboarding session or the strategic session we had back in December. 4% of 1,226 is 49 dispatches for fire. Does that sound right in the first?
Yes, sir.
So if we double that, that's 98, and I think the comparative number was 71 last year, so that'd be up 40%. Does that sound?
Sound roughly that's accurate.
Any causative factors you can identify behind that?
No, I can't. We investigate every fire, and what we do is try to tailor our prevention efforts. If we see a rise in kitchen fires or things that, candle fires or things that we can prevent or can be prevented through an educational program, we try to focus on that. I don't know that I can give you a reason of increase.
I'm just curious.
Yeah.
And secondly, so rescue and EMS, 47%. If I did the math right, that's 576. Does that sound about right?
That's about right.
And so if I double that, that's 1,152. I think the comparative number was 1,105. So up a little bit, not a lot.
Up a little bit. Where we're at overall for the year compared to we're about 1% behind where we were this time last year. So for fiscal year '22, we're about 1% lower than we were. But this is just a snapshot, and as different things happen, it's could change at any point. One storm could come through.
And you've given us sort of the breakdown by hour. Is there any seasonality? Do you see more of this in the winter than the summer, or?
I actually looked at month to month, and we're close to 200 calls a month. So it's, I mean, you're 10 or 12 here or there, but it's pretty close to the same throughout the year.
Great, thanks very much. Nothing further.
Barb Ficklin?
Of the calls that you get within the village, is there a particular area that is problematic, or are they spread out?
I don't know that we have any areas that are particularly problematic for the call types that we respond to. There are some that, the hospital is an example that we are dispatched to frequently because of the alarm system or issues that they have there, but there's also hundreds, if not thousands, of devices that activate the alarm. So there's not a problem that, if it were a problem of maintenance or maintaining a system of any alarm system, we would deal with that individually. But automatic alarms are probably the thing that we could look at.
And what percent would you say of the calls that you get for fires are commercial versus residential?
I could get that number for you. It's a lower percentage. The majority are in residential.
Jack Farrell?
Okay. Carlton, has our district expanded from the last few years, or is it still the same fire district outside the municipal limits? I mean, of course.
It is still the same. It's been the same since about 2015.
The other, congratulations on the time lost. 3-4 years is
Thank you.
outstanding considering everything. I only have one great questions. Everyone else I understand what their questions were, but my only question would be, and this is reaching for the stars, what would it take to go to ISO 1?
The
It's
biggest
a pretty rarefied atmosphere up there, yeah.
the biggest impact on that would be added staff. A ladder truck is one of the things that they say that we need. But again, they grade us based on what we have.
Yeah, I
So
know.
if we have or don't have, so we scored like an 83, I think, towards a class 2, so we'd have to make it to 90. So we'd need to gain 7 points in the overall scoring factor. People would push you there the fastest. It would take added resources to do that. And quite frankly, I'm not really sure that there's a benefit to make it to that point. There's always a benefit, I guess. For the commercial property, they would see some increase in that, but going from a 2 to a 1 for a community that's 80%, 85% residential, I'm not sure that we would see the biggest bang for the buck in doing that.
Return on investment may not be there necessarily.
To do it solely for reaching a class 1, yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If I could just follow, you talk about staff, is that one person, 3 people? Leave the ladder truck aside for the moment.
To add staff, we would have to do it in increments of 3 to add a person per shift. We could look back at the way ISO graded us. I think what we reviewed after the last ISO thing was the added station or the added ladder truck, and I think 9 people is what it looked like we would need with the state reviewing the scoring with us in order to change grades.
Thank you.
Thank you. I've got a few. One, my previous experience overseeing OSHA, the federal government, that is a very significant workplace safety accomplishment and time, so congratulations.
Thank you.
I don't know if that gets particularly recognized by the state.
It
or
does
It should. Okay. I'm curious if I found in my notes the FY '22 summary. I could not find FY '23. If I could get that, I would appreciate the full year, so,
Okay.
okay. I saved your sheet, because it's easy to read. And I am interested in the residential, commercial breakout. And it would be helpful to see what I call a heat map, to figure out geographically, where are these episodes happening? Particularly the fire ones. The other ones probably are just anywhere and everywhere. I am curious on the, what impact on insurance rates has our very successful fire department had on our residents? Because I know that is always an issue. What can you tell us?
I can tell you what the Department of Insurance tells us. So moving from, and I've talked to some insurance companies as well, underwriters. Moving from a class 5 or 6, and you talk to different people, they see different things. Improving to a class, anything below that, for residential, it's minimal change. But commercial businesses, commercial policies see the biggest change in that. I can't get them to give me a number. They tell me for residential, if we moving from a 4, which is where we were, to a 2, you would see maybe 10% difference in homeowners premiums if they use the ISO rating in determining the policy.
So there's no way to have firm data that we can say, we did this and this caused X for our residents on rates, or not?
What the Department of Insurance says is you won't see a change, you won't see a significant change dropping below a 5, even if we're a 1 for residential.
Oh.
Although the insurers tell me that they will see a change, it's just not as significant as from, say, a 7 to a 5.
I see. Okay. So there's a point of the returns, you can only do so well. There has been a lot in the news about other fire departments, and I, of course, tear out these articles. So I'm going to ask a question that, something I've never heard of before. You probably can educate me on this. This was a result of a county commissioner's hearing, so you're probably familiar with this word. This issue of over-response. What is over-response in your wording, and what is its impact?
So the question, that question specifically from Chairman Paserno,
Yes.
dealt with an EMS call that I guess you could say it was an end-of-life situation for a terminal patient, is my understanding. 911 was called, an ambulance showed up, and additional resources showed up. And I'm not sure where the call was at, but fire department showed up based on the dispatch protocol for, just say, a CPR in progress. And that's kind of the gist of why an over-response. They sent those resources for a situation that was end of life for a person. Of course, we don't know that. Fire service doesn't know that. EMS doesn't know that. If they call 911 and ask for assistance for a severe call, they send the same resources regardless of that.
Are there metrics that look at these things like over-response, or was that just
I think
term
it's
of
probably,
art?
I think it's probably just not the best choice of words and how the pilot quoted that.
Well, that's why I had never seen the phrase before.
Right. So how we respond to things is based on putting the number of people on scene to safely operate. So for a structure fire, we're looking for 16 to 17 people to operate safely at a residential structure fire. So that's why it's Pinehurst, Aberdeen, Southern Pines, maybe West End, Whispering Pines, Eastwood, the surrounding communities come as well. All of those don't come to every call, but we have several that come when if we're dispatched to a structure fire, they're dispatched with us automatically. Medical calls are based on the National Academy of Emergency Medical Dispatch. So so if you've ever called 911, they ask you a dozen questions. You say you need an ambulance, they dispatch the ambulance, and then they go into the interrogation process to determine what resources need to go. There are cases, I think, PD's notified, fire department's notified when it reaches this level, just to try to make sure we assign the correct resources to the problem.
The other one was the Southern Pines Fire Department was in the news, and they had a report where they have somehow, I guess they figured out the average response for an in-town call was so many minutes and so many seconds. Do we track that too?
We track it overall in the district.
They had a separate number for in the district.
Right. We do it based on, so Pinehurst is divided into 6 different fire zones. And it is the village, Taylortown, and rural district included in that. And we look at the 90th percentile based on the accreditation standard. So for, meaning we respond to emergency traffic, which is lights and siren, at the 90th percentile from our notification to on scene, we're about 9 minutes and 8 seconds.
In the district?
That's village or district, so that's
Because
total.
it said in the district for Southern Pines, what they called for mutual aid calls, it was 13 minutes and 23 seconds.
So that example would be, for instance, Southern Pines coming to assist us, or us going to, for us to provide mutual aid, we're going to assist Southern Pines. So,
And our mutual aid then is quicker.
well, no, our district response at 9 minutes and 8 seconds are just calls in our fire district or Pinehurst, and our first fire apparatus arriving on scene. So it's
Within
not a,
district is a different thing than mutual aid, is what you're
right.
saying.
Mutual aid means we're sending resources somewhere else. So for Southern Pines to look at a mutual aid, so that's like Southern Pines coming to us is what they're saying, or going to Aberdeen or Vass or Pine Bluff. So how long it takes their truck to get to another town or jurisdiction.
Do we have some historical data on how our response time has changed over a period of years?
We could get
Could
that.
you get that? I'd be
Yeah.
curious to see that over several years, just because I hear the phrase, but I just don't know how to turn it into a metric that I can watch.
We do have it. It's pretty readily available.
Great, whenever. It's not a rush to me. And how many residents in Taylortown? I guess all of Taylortown is in our district, right?
Yes, sir.
And how many residents does that encompass?
It's about 1,000, about 1,000 people. So that's maybe 500 homes.
Okay, thank you. I didn't know what that was. Last thing, I noticed that Station 91 has a meeting room that's rented on occasion to our citizens.
Yep. Yes, sir.
I was just curious, how does that work out? I mean, you get a lot of people come in there and use the rent the room?
It's a little bit less frequent now since the community center opened. They offered programs in there. We do have community groups that occasionally request and use our training room, though.
That's right. I remember using it during the power outage.
Yes, sir.
It was packed because everyone was in there to get their phone charged or
Yes, sir.
to get donuts. But
Coffee.
coffee, yes. And
The essentials.
yes. That covers it. We'll look for your follow-up information, and thank you for your work. And you read the ETC polling data, so you're very highly thought of, your department's very highly thought of by our residents. Thank you very much.
We try very hard.
I know you do.
Thank you very much.
Okay. And now, the police. Go ahead. Thank you, Glenn.
Thank you. So our report's a little different. The way we report things for statistical purposes is usually on the calendar year. So we do 2 reports per year, the full previous calendar year and then the current fiscal year at the end of the fiscal year. So that'll come in July once we're through this fiscal year. What this report essentially tells you is that we have a very safe community. It doesn't mean no crimes occurred, because as you can see, some do. But our officers, through self-initiated and citizen-initiated, answered just over 26,000 calls last year. Calls for service between traffic stops and someone calling for police assistance, or them just noticing something that they needed to give extra attention to. We noticed a decrease in our breaking and enterings by 37%, a decrease in theft of motor vehicles, theft from motor vehicles by 47%. And that's when that's essentially a breaking and entering of a motor vehicle. Some of the terminology has changed because of NIBRS. So that's someone going into someone else's vehicle and taking something. Our assaults were down 14%. Our most noticeable increase was in the broad category of fraud, which was mainly encapsulated in identity theft. Most of these things occur from actors outside of our jurisdiction. They exist because of data breaches. For example, if a big box store's data gets breached and that information is collected by the criminal enterprise, they will take advantage of, for example, we had an issue with Citibank where they were doing a $500 bonus for starting a new account. So the criminal would, through the data breach, get the information, create the account. Once the $500 was in there, withdraw it, and they did this on an enormous scale, nationwide, so millions of dollars. Our residents don't find out until the debit card shows up. So no actual money was taken in a lot of these cases, but there's still an identity theft. These are referred to the FBI because it's a multinational organization most of the time that's doing these types of things. So kind of out of our real control, and it's also outside of personal control. It didn't happen because someone clicked on a link they shouldn't or gave out too much information. It was their data stolen from a server that they had no control over, no knowledge that it had even happened until they received that information in the mail. The police interactions with the police they don't always seem positive, but I'm very proud of our staff because we do a survey where if you call the police department, you get a text message, and it allows you to rate the service you got from the telecommunicator as well as the police officer. And our survey results are a 93.77% positivity rate with a response rate of 43%. When we started using the software, we were told to expect a mostly negative response with about a 20% response rate. And it's just a testament to the professional service that our officers provide when they go out there, because we're rarely delivering good news, yet 93% of the time from the respondents, they're motivated to say that they had a positive result with our officers. Internally, there's more than just going out and enforcing the law. There's a lot of training and backup that we have to do to maintain certifications and to keep a professional agency working for the village. This year, our officers have had to take at least 8 online classes, and these aren't classes where you can just let a video play then take a test. You actually have to sit there and go through each slide and take the test to a minimum proficiency. And there's also 8 more in-person classes that we have to do. That's more of our practical things like firearms, subject control and arrest, hazmat, bloodborne pathogens, things like that. And then they have advanced training that they engage in, like the Police Law Institute, which is a 2-week course at the Justice Academy that teaches them current law, legal updates, as well as how to write search warrants legally and to be within the law and techniques to do that correctly. But then they also have to do their annual recertifications in Toxilizer, radar, so that they're proficient in those skills to help enforce the laws in the town, in the village. Last year, every agency has experienced shortages. We experienced one. We're working to fill those now. We're down to the last few vacancies to fill. But despite that, they still wrote over 1,900 citations. And if you look at the stats on that, that's down over the average. But to put that in context, about 3.5 years ago, I started an at-home deployment strategy. We were engaged with some task forces, and I found through looking at the data that a lot of those citations were being written outside of the village. So they were participating in task force checkpoints and things, and we still do a little of that, but mostly in the village. So we went from a deficit of about 35% of our citations being written outside of our jurisdiction, so now it's maybe 2%. So we're getting more bang for our buck, and the numbers aren't that far off, especially when you consider that we've had a few staffing shortages, so they're out there really hustling and trying to address any traffic problems.
For clarification, what constitutes a citation?
That is something that is written on a North Carolina general statute citation that requires some effort for a court date. So that can be a misdemeanor or an infraction: speeding, seat belts, running a stop sign, registration violations, things like that. Basic traffic violations.
Citation is basically traffic.
Right, and this
I
does
read
not
those
include-
reports, and I see sometimes it's a verbal warning, sometimes it's a written warning, and sometimes it's a citation. So you guys make distinctions based on whatever's going on at that moment and that incident, right? Okay.
Yes, and that does not include any parking citations. Those aren't included in that. This is all traffic stop from an observed violation. Administratively, there's a lot of heavy lifting going on with the command staff and our non-sworn staff getting ready for the U.S. Open this year, as well as ensuring compliance with all of the standards from training and standards to include the parts of the reporting requirements for SB 300 that came into law last year, as well as we're working toward state accreditation through training and standards as well to be we'd be the second accredited agency in the county, the first through the NC LEA. And I'll take any questions there. Ours was pretty quick and brief, but
We'll start with Dr. Morgan.
The two violent crimes, what were they?
one was an arson and one was a robbery.
Okay, thank you.
Really, one of them was Carlin's.
Okay, fair enough. Same question that we gave Carlton then. What problems? What keeps you up at night? What do we need to know for that's not on the good news thing you're presenting?
Sure. For me, it's that someone's life could change on a traffic stop. When it comes to our training and equipment, we are head and shoulders above most places, especially with our technology, the ability to live stream our body cameras, the LPRs, license plate readers we have built into our dash cameras. Our weapons platforms are state of the art. Our body armor is state of the art. It's just that unknown variable that while I'm at home asleep, I've got officers making traffic stops to try to keep this village safe, and their life could change on any traffic stop.
That's an inherent risk of law enforcement. And sounds like with the equipment we've got, that we are minimizing it to the degree we can. Is there any way we can make that better, minimize it more?
I don't know that we could. From the equipment we have is far beyond the basics. I don't know anyone else anyone else in our region here has the abilities that we do. So currently, when our officers are responding to calls, our telecommunicator as well as backup officers can watch it on their mobile screens, as well as telecommunications can put it up on their screen. And so they're able to react much quicker. For example, if you got in a struggle, it's hard to get to your radio, but if someone's already watching, they're already speeding up. With our LPRs, I know you saw in the paper where we had a Chilean theft ring that hadn't committed any crimes in Pinehurst, but because of that, and we were doing traffic enforcement on the circle, the LPR hit on the tag, and we were able to get them arrested and close out cases in at least 3 or 4 cities in North Carolina and all the way up the East Coast back to Nassau County, New York. So I don't think that equipment-wise or even training-wise, because we're each year you approve a good and healthy training budget. So we're able to get our officers the training they need. A lot of people are very jealous of what we get to do because we have such state-of-the-art equipment and we have such availability for training that you don't just routinely get.
Thank you. I hope that if we're ever shy on that or we are not meeting the bill of what we need to do to keep the officers as safe as possible, please bring that up to us. As a father of a law enforcement officer, my wife and I certainly appreciate the risks that are taken, and we thank you for what you and your officers do. So appreciate your service.
John, you have anything?
Just one, so if I think my American Express card has been compromised or my bank account, I'm calling the Pinehurst Police Department. What do people expect you to do about that?
Well, what we can do is connect them to someone that can help, which would be a federal agency. And then it depends on how it's compromised. If you think it's compromised from a data leak, then we can connect them in with a national fraud network. If you think it's compromised because someone, a relative, a friend, someone you hired to do work at your house stole your credit card, we can handle it on that end as well.
And the only other significant increase I see there, admittedly off a low base, is community threats. Talk a little bit about what is the nature of those?
That's communicating threats. I should have spelled that all the way out. So apparently everybody was threatening each other, but they weren't actually assaulting each other because those were down. And those just coming, this is probably going to end up being an outlier year for us. We'll occasionally spike them up and down, or a lot of times those go unreported because people have an argument and then just move on, and sometimes they report it. And charges can be filed on those, and we've made several arrests for it where people were willing to pursue charges.
And just one other question that would not be contained in this information, but what's the early report on frequency of accidents post the installation of bollards in the traffic circle? Are you seeing a material decline there?
Yet somewhat,
It's early days, but
sure. Yeah, what it has caused, if there's going to be a violation, they have to do it later. So at least, at least they're having to look longer before they get there, but they're obviously not doing it earlier because they're all still vertical, but there has been a reduction that has helped.
Great. Nothing further. Thank you.
Thank you. Barb?
Just have a curiosity question. How much of what you do involves following up on noise ordinance or parking ordinance violations, and where does that fit in here?
It's seasonal. It would just fit in with the calls of service. The citations for those are similar to a parking ticket. They're a local ordinance that's written, so those aren't counted as far as our crime reporting. But I can email you those stats. I can find out what those are exactly. But it's we're in the wintertime, so there's less visitors, and we haven't had very many related to those. Most of what we get right now is barking dogs.
One other question, I've seen a lot of activity, email activity, people dealing with mail fraud, coming along and taking checks out of mailboxes, that kind of thing. Is that something you're seeing an increase in?
Not here. It's happened in a few neighboring jurisdictions, and I think that's why we're getting so much information on it, because it's right next door, and I've spoken with other law enforcement agencies and been briefed on it, because they're doing what's called check washing. They'll steal checks, wash them, and then reuse them. But we haven't had that experience here. If we have, it's been very recent and very small. It hasn't been brought to my attention. But when I checked ours when this was starting to go around and when I was putting this report together, we hadn't had any at that time.
Jack?
Do we lose much time for court appearances? We do, okay.
Yeah, we lose a lot of time at the hospital and at court because we handle involuntary commitments.
Right.
One thing that's going to help that out, from what I understand, First Health is pursuing its own company police department, so that'll save us a lot of staff time during the week. We're doing a lot to support them in that, and even offering. It doesn't cost us anything to allow their officer to sit in training when we have instructors
really
on
does.
staff. We're not contracting out, so we'll work in partnership with them to help get them up to speed and go in there.
Yeah, I understand that could be useful. I assume all the neighboring communities have also converted to the latest recording, the IBR standards within the last few years. So are we able to compare ourselves to Southern Pines and Aberdeen, our neighboring communities? And do we do that at all?
We do. I really enjoy telling them that we are all part of the same community. We're just the good part. But I'm teasing them. But no, our stats are in line with theirs. They're also very safe communities. They tend to have more incidents than we do, and that's just by the nature of having big box stores,
Right.
more multifamily dwellings. So they do have more incidents and different types of incidents than we tend to.
As we note in the paper, right? Yeah. So unfortunately, I am one of the statistics on the fraud line, and I can tell you that one of the reasons it's up is that the first thing many of these firms that you use or contact when you have an identity theft issue, they say, make sure you file a police report with a local police. So they're directing you to drive this number up pretty high. Whether you're able to do anything about it, of course, doesn't matter. It seems like that seems like one of the check boxes you're supposed to go through. So that's obviously where it's a little bit where it's coming from. So good job. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Chief, a handful of questions. One is I would be interested in the comparison data with our Tri-Cities neighbors here, because we do gather occasionally from time to time, and I would find it helpful, as well as the information that Barb asked about. The surveillance cameras are in the news a lot. Do we utilize those, not on officers, but anywhere else in the village?
Yes and no. We don't utilize them on a daily basis focused on any specific thing, but we do occasionally use covert cameras for investigations. However, that's fairly rare, but we do have that capability.
And if individual businesses or buildings have their own security camera there, if something goes on, you guys can have access to that?
It's up to them whether or not they
Up to
turn
them?
it over voluntarily. There's court processes that we can use, but I'll say that in this community, businesses and residents are very generous with assisting us in any investigations. You know, occasionally we'll have an incident in a neighborhood where a few cars get broken into or there's some suspicious activity, and the community lines up with video clips to give us that we can share with other agencies to try to identify people. So we're very fortunate here to have an engaged community that cooperates in investigations and wants to keep us considered one of the safest communities. And just for comparison purposes, if you just Google it, we tend to be in the top 5 safest communities.
Yeah, safest.
in the
State.
state
I've seen
routinely.
that. I've seen that. Two other thoughts. One is that I would find it helpful, in addition to seeing a 2023 crime report and the 5-year moving average, to see what 2022 was. It just helps me think back to what was it a year ago as opposed to the 5-year moving average. I do want to see that also. And I also think it would be easier on the eyes and easier to look at from an information standpoint if any of this could be converted into pie charts so that we can really visually see right away where there are some real problems and where there really aren't, or the problems are significantly so low that we should be proud about them right away. Is there anything that the state does regarding our police department here, regarding crime in general, how we work with them, or are they hands off, and how do we work with state law enforcement agencies?
They're generally hands-off unless they're requested, but whenever we have any kind of crime occur, we work well with our partners, both state and federal. We've got federal agents that live in and around that we all have relationships with. We have former officers that are now state-level officers that are doing different things in different agencies, and the special agents in charge and the assistant special agents in charge, they engage with the Chiefs Association and the police chiefs. So anyone that's assigned to our local area, we have a good working relationship with. The U.S. Open is also helping with that because we've spent a lot more time with, for example, Director House of the ALE. Colonel Johnson, the Highway Patrol, is a local person. He's from Cumberland County, so he's from right next door.
Yeah, that was my last question, had to do with the upcoming U.S. Open. Is there anything in particular you prepare for the U.S. Open?
Mainly staffing, making sure that our officers are ready and understanding the layouts and just any kind of normal incident command and incident management system. We work very closely with the fire department as well because part of security is also health and safety. And so we're in the same meetings working on those things. And our biggest goal is that no one ever even knows we're there.
Right. I do notice in the reports there are, I can't put a number on it, but it pops up a lot, the involuntary commitment issue at First Health. So I gather what First Health is planning to do will have a real impact on your force as to what you have to be doing.
Yes, sir. It'll change us from having to gather the person up and get them there and then stay with them until they find a bed somewhere, which is a minimum of 2 hours, to just getting them there and connecting them with care.
Okay. Well,
I'd be
that'll
curious to hear a little more on that. The issue on there for transporting patients that have been committed from an emergency room to another facility is that if they're not, this is at least in the past, unless they've figured out a way around this, if they're not law enforcement personnel, and then a person decides, hey, I want you to release me right now, this is kidnapping because you're not a law enforcement personnel, basically they have to release them. They can't force them in there, whereas a law enforcement personnel could. So I'm not sure, that's why you always call the police, or the sheriff, whether it's the police service in there, it has to be a actual license, not licensed, but a
Right.
law enforcement officer
official.
that's official in there. So I don't know how they've broken through that. I'd be curious to find out as to how they're doing that.
They'll do that through being a company police department. So they'll be able to, under the law, do everything on campus that we can do.
Ah,
The only difference between them and the campus police is they won't have jurisdiction on adjacent roads, whereas, for example, University Police Department would. They will only have jurisdiction on their private property as well as any road they own.
Okay.
When it comes to transporting them off facility, transporting someone who's been IVC'd from the facility to a permanent or more permanent facility, that's the responsibility of the sheriff. And so that also is what causes some of the delay, is once they're found a bed, that we still can't leave them until they're turned over to the deputy to take them from First Health somewhere else. If they're going to stay at First Health, then we walk them.
Got it, okay. So that just cleared up a lot of, but the point of it is when you have involuntary commit, that is leaving your facility and going to a psychiatric facility, that's on there. That's something we had to deal with over in the VA. We had VA police, but VA police could not do that because they didn't have jurisdiction on other roads. And so that's a stumbling block. We have this goes back to a different problem. We have a lot of people in First Health, especially in the emergency room, that it's backing up because you end up having people that are committed and need to go to these facilities, and we can't get them out for that. So it's not the forum to discuss that, but that's the reason I brought that up, just in bringing it up attention.
thank you. It's good to recognize that because it does pop up there, and it's understandable, and you can hear it from people who go to the emergency room, and they want to share a story. One of the stories is, boy, the person who came in after me was handcuffed. And, that's something you walk out of there remembering. And, well, that's where they're going to take somebody who's been in a fight and an altercation and there's a criminal activity involved. What else do they do then? So,
I seem to recall being surprised at the low percentage of hours that are actually involved in patrol, and part of the explanation was sitting there waiting for something like that where you can adequately hand the person over. So that will all contribute to improving that number as well.
Yeah, just to clarify, I think the number you're referring to is the percentage of time officers are available for patrol. That also doesn't include when they're responding to something on patrol.
later on this evening, we're going to be discussing fees and charges schedule. And one of the things that, when I was reviewing it, pops right out is the parking fines. I'll call it fines. Very tiny. There's a bigger fee to remove a pile of manure out of the barns here than there is for someone who's violating our downtown parking. So I'm curious about your thoughts, while I have you here, on the issue of increasing a fee or charge to a violation of a parking law.
That depends on, honestly, the purview of the council, of whether
Sure.
you want it to be more punitive or more deterrent.
Right. Is there at $5 for some of them, obviously, there's nothing punitive. It's nowhere near punitive. And it's probably nowhere near a deterrent either. But I'm curious, what happens in other jurisdictions, or I'm trying to get a feel for it because it pops out as a question as you go down that list of fees.
It varies from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. Some use third-party parking apps. For example, I was in Greenville recently and took one of my daughters out to eat, and I used one of the apps and paid for parking on
sure,
the
okay.
app. And then
I've seen that.
if I stay over time, it deals with it. And they have parking enforcement, which is notified, but anyway. Or you could have dedicated parking personnel to monitor it, and there's various ways to do that through either LPR or in conjunction with apps like that. I'd have to also check what other fines are. I always legally park, so I haven't received a parking ticket.
Of course not. I wasn't suggesting that there's any linkage to that.
So I don't have that fresh in my head of what that
Right.
would cost.
Yes. I
But
remember
can-
in Washington, D.C., I signed up for that parking app too, and it sort of worked. But if you could just check around the world here in this area about where we stand in that, because it seems so de minimis that it creates a little snicker on some parts of some folks when they look at it. So we'll talk more about it later on this. I don't have any other questions or comments. Anybody else? Okay. Well, thank you both.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. And also, I want to encourage you, as I've seen you both present in various situations to neighborhood communities that meet, or to our neighborhood advisory committee. And it is always good for them to hear directly from you all, because it fills in the gaps in their own thinking as to what's going on out there. So thanks again. All right. Oh, boy. Okay, we've got a series of items here, Jeff, dealing with the SMPO, Sandhills Metropolitan Planning Organization. I don't remember the acronym. And so we've got items 7, 8, and 9. So I'm going to turn it over to you all and figure out how you want to run this show here.
Go ahead, Doug.
Go ahead, Dana. So, I mean, as you know, we're part of the new Sandhills Metropolitan Organization, which was officially approved at the end of December. And we've had a meeting of the governing board, which went very well. I think we're well on track for where we should be. And we even had our first TCC, that's the Technical Coordinating Committee. I think I got that right. And so.
How did that work?
It went very well.
Okay.
So we covered a lot of area, and we're meeting again later with the governing board this week. So that stuff we covered then, we'll cover with the governing board. So one of the things that we were trying to figure out is like, okay, over the next 6 months, what do we have to get done? And I think we
Right.
made good progress on that. But to get all this in motion, there's a few things. So the first one is that Dana has worked with the NCDOT to come up with an agreement on that we get the money from the state and the federal resources. And so I'll let Dana discuss that one.
Okay, so people who are listening, and maybe some here, may not understand the scope and the responsibility of the SMPO. You might want to just give a quick overview of what's involved there and why are we doing this?
Sure. So once a region hits an urban area of 50,000 people or more, they need to create a metropolitan planning organization. So it's really dealing with transportation planning. So the name's a little bit of a misnomer, but we're dealing with it. So the Southern County area has reached that threshold. So with the last census, and so now we're creating this organization. So the organization gets everyone on the same page. And a lot of what we do is prioritize projects for future funding. So we will, have a development plan of what we want to see here in the next. Well, we have plans for 5 years, 20 years, and 30 years, so that'll prioritize what we want to get funded by either state funds or federal funds, and help us develop an overall comprehensive plan for the area.
Okay. And Pinehurst has a seat at the table, and
Yeah, we're one of, is it 9
members.
communities in the State Department of Transportation as well?
right. Okay, thank you.
8 and the state. I can't remember.
I think it's 9. But, and yes, the other, I think, important piece for anyone that's here or watching to understand is Pinehurst's role, not just as a member of this organization, but we are what's called the lead planning agency. So we are the one that is signing all of these agreements with the Department of Transportation, this kind of overarching financial agreement, and then in the future, as actual grant funding is awarded, we will be the ones actually executing the grant agreement documents, and we are administratively kind of responsible. So this financial agreement is the first piece that needs to be executed with the North Carolina Department of Transportation. This is their standard MPO agreement. I think some of the key pieces to this to understand, one is we as the lead planning agency are the ones that NCDOT is contracting with, because the MPO is not its own separate legal entity or something that they are able to sign, come to this agreement with. We will be the ones receiving the funding, and in this agreement, it's basically stating that we as the village are agreeing that we are effectively responsible for making sure the work is carried out. There's the next agenda item, that's an agreement between Pinehurst as the LPA, lead planning agency, and the MPO that kind of helps to further clarify some of those responsibilities and I think kind of mitigate some of the financial and other risk that the village takes on by being the lead planning agency. But at the end of the day, we are the ones responsible. So I think that's an important thing to understand, that even though there's the governing board of the MPO, there will be MPO director and staff. At the end of the day, it comes down to us with this agreement.
Okay, thank you.
So that's the first item, which would be the agreement with NCDOT. So
Okay, is anybody, let me ask if anybody has any questions for them. Just for the record, I'm the Pinehurst representative on that, voting representative, and the alternate is John Taylor. So we cover these meetings, obviously looking out for our interests as well as cooperating with our neighbors and trying to find some successes. If there's any questions, otherwise I'll entertain a motion on Resolution 2409.
Actually, before we go there, and I apologize because I can't find my notes. I don't know whether it is in 2409 or 2410. There was a statement made that Pinehurst has, as the lead organization, has the responsibility to deliver something. And I forgot what the
That's in
something is.
2410.
Pardon me?
That's in 2410.
Fine, we'll save it for 2410 then.
I move to approve Resolution 24-09, SMPO Lead Planning Agency Financial Agreement with NCDOT, a resolution to enter into the financial agreement for the Sand Hills Metropolitan Planning Organization.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor indicate by aye.
Aye.
Okay, no dissents. Approved. Go ahead. Item number 8.
Okay, well, Dana pulls that up. I'll introduce it a little bit. So like we said, we're the lead planning agency. And so we're creating an agreement between the village and the actual SMPO board. So what we wanted to do was clarify what the village is providing and what the expectations of the SMPO group is. And then on top of that, in exchange for all our services, there is payment. So we're the lead planning agency, we're going to be housing it, so there's a facility cost as well as administrative costs. And there's a spreadsheet included in the packet, but we came up with $27,000 that we feel is an appropriate amount for the village to charge the SMPO group for a given year. And so we charge the group, 80% of that will be reimbursed with federal funds, and then the remaining 20% will be paid through the dues process from the other communities.
I think we take a moment just to remind our residents that in the end, our financial contribution to this, if I recall correctly, is actually less than $10,000. Am I right about that?
I think we budgeted 15,000.
Budgeted 15, but okay. So it's de minimis, shall I say? And
In the
so
big picture,
just so our residents don't think that there's something, hitting our books that we need to worry about. Okay, thank you.
Correct. Yep.
We're able to dive into the details about what exactly we're providing and what the expectation are from the SMPO group. I don't know if you necessarily want to do that.
I'll see if there's any questions. That's probably the best way. John Taylor, is this where you had a question?
There was a somewhat open-ended responsibility or obligation that we are taking on. I suspect it is not necessarily anything dramatic, but learned a long time ago when you're on the hook for something, it's at least prudent to ask, what is the potential financial ramifications, if any, for that? And I'm thinking it's less likely that we would fail in some responsibility, but this is a multifaceted organization. We already saw several other towns in the county voice some objections to what is going on. And what is our potential exposure in the event we were unable to fulfill that part of the obligation?
Yeah, that's exactly why we entered into this agreement, because we were concerned that, if something doesn't happen, we could be left holding the bag, so to speak. I don't think that would actually happen, but this agreement would ensure that it doesn't. So if, say, there were some money spent that were for some reason not reimbursable by the federal government, those would be spread out through the different communities and not just left to, for us to pay it or try to claw it back without having some legal authority to do it.
I thought we had the obligation to deliver something.
It might be like the Unified Work Program. Because we also had that discussion that in actually the NCDOT agreement, it said that the village was responsible for that. But by us entering into this LPA agreement, we're saying that the SMPO is actually responsible for that work product. And we're just the administrative support to it.
Given the way that the funds flow in and flow out, I wasn't concerned particularly that we would have a financial responsibility. The question was more, do we have any sort of legal obligation or exposure there? And if you think this is the agreement that covers exactly that, then I am content.
It is. I mean, when we will also be the host for the SMPO director, which will be doing much of the work of this. So, but it will, to the extent possible, that's an SMPO employee. Although we do the payroll, all the benefits.
That employee will be housed here in our building, so just
Okay,
remind.
thank you.
Okay, thanks. Okay, I'll entertain a motion.
Well, my only other concern was related to, in trying to read the document, it's pretty extensive, the responsibility that we're taking on and the activity we're going to be involved in on an accounting basis and financial basis and human resources basis. I just hope this isn't the straw that breaks the camel's back and we have to, in fact, hire just to cover this, this activity. That would be the biggest concern I would have.
I think that's a fair concern, especially as we're getting this actually set up. It's kind of a little bit of a work burden on, I wouldn't say burden, but we're definitely putting effort towards it. I think once we have that SMPO director in place, that'll actually lift a lot of the burden, and a lot of the day-to-day activities will be handled by that, and we will really only be doing the administrative things that we put into our budget that we're doing on a monthly basis.
It's pretty overwhelming to read the list of items that we're signing up for, although the volume of how often they happen, I guess, is going to make a big difference. If it's just periodically or something like that, we can handle it.
Yeah, and a lot of it's just, marginal increase, like one more person on payroll isn't going to make a huge difference, and one more set of bills isn't a huge difference. But yeah, I appreciate the concern that if you load too much, it could create a problem over time.
Exactly, right. No, I like us being the lead. It's just that I don't want to overwhelm the staff with one more additional responsibility.
Right now, I don't feel like that is a concern, and
Be your best judge of that.
And I can see the village will be basically paying all the expenditures, both payroll, any invoices for traffic studies, et cetera, for the SMPO upfront, and then being reimbursed from the grant funds after the fact. And that's done on a quarterly basis. So I see probably from the finance staff's perspective at least, putting that quarterly reimbursement packet together, it's pretty detailed in terms of the amount of backup that NCDOT requires for that. But I think it's certainly something that we have the capacity to
And the
handle.
first time through will be a little more onerous than the second and third, and so
Yes.
forth.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just related to that, in the indemnification clause, my past experience is mostly with financial contracts, hiring a manager, hiring the general partner of a partnership, what have you. And usually the indemnification excludes either gross or simple negligence. There's no mention of that here at all. Is that something that is different under North Carolina law that I'm not familiar with, or just not something that we think is likely to come up?
I don't think it's necessarily likely that that comes up. We can definitely go back and look at that indemnification and make sure it covers us to the fullest extent possible.
I'm assuming Village Council reviewed this as well.
Yeah, and where do we actually? So we may have borrowed these from other organizations that are
Yes.
further along in the process, so.
I mean, I'm not a lawyer, I don't play one on television, but I did notice that there was no mention of that, and that's something that I would have viewed as standard but may not be applicable given the nature of this organization.
Yeah, we can certainly double check on that and email council.
Okay.
Very well. I'll entertain a motion.
I move to approve Resolution 2410, Lead Planning Agency Agreement with SMPO, a resolution to enter into the Lead Planning Agency Agreement.
Second.
A motion and a second. All those in favor indicate by aye.
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 Okay, motion's passed. Item number, what do we have to, 9 now? Yes, the Special Revenue Fund.
So this last item is to create a special revenue fund, just so that all those SMPO funds are kept separate from the village. And Dana can talk to that in more detail.
Yep, that's exactly what this is. And the NCDOT financial agreement does require that we are able to, it doesn't specify that we have to have a separate fund, but I think that's just best practice. But it does require that we are able to, separately account for the MPO funds from any village funds.
We're just here, we're segregating this account.
Correct. Yep, so all of the grant revenues, and if we go to the second page here, you'll see these are the estimated, anticipated revenues. It's basically for FY '24 going to be state grants, and we did actually get confirmation last week from NCDOT after this document had been submitted, that there actually will be no member share required for the FY '24 portion, so that SMPO member dues portion will not be collected.
Oh, I remember that,
But I think the budget amount there is still going to be appropriate. It won't be an issue if we don't collect those, since they won't be necessary. But yes, we are essentially saying these are the revenues that are going to support the expenditures for the SMPO. That estimated budget of $100,000 for the expenditures is based on NCDOT's estimate that for a full fiscal year, we would need $200,000. We were estimating roughly half of a fiscal year for that amount. So I think that would be sufficient to get us through just to the end of our fiscal year 2024. One way in which this special revenue fund will be different from the ARPA Special Revenue Fund, for example, was set up as a multi-year project where we knew we had one grant document and a budget that spanned the life of that grant award. This one, since this will be an ongoing operation with new grant funds awarded each year, this is going to be, appropriated annually. So each year going forward, starting with FY '25, the SMPO budget, which will be kind of approved and requested first by the SMPO governing board, it will be included in our village fiscal year budget ordinance and appropriation. So there will be included in our ordinance not just the general fund anymore, but a separate section that also appropriates funds for expenditure and the anticipated revenues for the SMPO Special Revenue Fund.
Okay. Questions on this item?
So, from a entry point of view, obviously, these will be separate entries. But will the funds actually be commingled in accounts?
The cash funds in terms of
Right.
our bank accounts and investment accounts, yes, which that is allowed. We do not have to maintain a separate bank account, which is good because it does complicate things if you have to open separate bank accounts and account for the inflows and outflows in each. But our accounting system, by having this in a separate fund, will keep track of how much cash essentially is due from the special revenue fund back to the general fund.
Allowed to be
investments.
commingled, okay.
Correct.
got
The
it.
cash can be commingled as long as we're accounting for the operations
Right.
separately and can keep track of how much is owed between the two.
Understand, thank you.
Yep.
Anyone else? Okay, I'll entertain a motion on this then. Number 9.
I move to approve ordinance 24-04, establishing the SMPO Special Revenue Fund, a grant project ordinance adopting a special revenue fund to account for the revenues and expenditures of the Sand Hills Metropolitan Planning Organization and appropriate funds for fiscal year 2024.
Second.
Okay, motion and a second. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, adopted.
Okay, I'm going to let Dana answer all the $5 parking ticket questions.
We don't collect the revenue from those for the most part, by the way. So.
That's one of my questions, but go ahead. Start the show.
Yeah,
Quite-
so
Quite a long list of items
So around this time each year, we do revisit our fees and charges schedule that becomes effective for July, as of July 1st, so for the next fiscal year. And so we collect from the department heads any requested changes that they recommend to the fees and charges schedule. The summary of the changes is in one of the documents here. Overall, I don't think there were too many significant changes to the fees. Several were just updating language or links in the document. There was an increase recommended for planning and inspections when it comes to residential building permits in terms of the per square footage fee. That's bringing it more in line with other areas. Yes?
When I read it, I went through you had like a blue line or a red line. Is that?
You want the red line version?
Yeah.
Sure.
That was very helpful to know to and from, and there we go. That's what I read.
Yes. Yep, so we'll go through here. So here is just updating the link that was referenced, adding that there's a minimum 2 hours that will be charged if that fire service fee applies. Sorry, let me zoom this in further. It's very small. The next is here for our residential building permits, increasing this per square foot fee. This is to kind of bring us more in line with what other jurisdictions, neighboring jurisdictions charge, as well as making adjustments to make sure that we're covering the actual cost of these building permit reviews.
That's going from
It's going from-
0.17 to 0.30?
Yes, so from 17 cents per square foot to 30 cents.
Okay, thank you.
There were some changes to the Fair Barn. The overall increase to the fees for the rental charges ranges from like 2 to 4%, but essentially what they are doing here is previously there was a base fee.
Looks more than 2 to 4%.
Yes, so there used to be these base fees and then a package rate that included tables, chairs, and different amenities. They're finding at the Fair Barn, almost everyone is doing the base fee and the package. So they're just combining those into and consolidating them into basically one base fee. So it does look like a much larger increase because you see this going from, 2,130 to 3,750, but it's because they are combining it with the $1,500 fee that was part of a package that was optional. But this is going to greatly simplify the fees that the Fair Barn staff are handling it, as well as make it simpler for the people that are renting, the clients that are renting the Fair Barn. And just making it kind of an all-in, our base includes all of the amenities now.
And what distinguishes a corporate meeting from these other type of rentals?
Good question. I believe there's a definition probably down below. Corporate meeting is any commercial or nonprofit renter using the facility Monday through Thursday, basically between 8 a.m. and 5 p.m., so, your standard business hours. And it will include tables and chairs. So corporate meeting is basically just saying that it's if you're doing kind of a meeting using the facility during normal business hours, Monday through Thursday.
And you go back, and what is, in the commercial meeting, I'm trying to get the distinction between the commercial and the
Yeah,
corporate.
so there was something here. So that is if the Fair Barn's being rented, weekday or weekend by a commercial entity. So there's a definition of a commercial entity is an individual, sole proprietorship, corporation, business, or other entity that does not qualify under any of the other renter categories. So it's not a resident, non-resident individual, nonprofit.
Okay.
So that would be a commercial use outside of normal business hours.
Yep. So I would imagine that could be, if a business held a holiday party at the Fair Barn on a Friday night,
Gotcha.
maybe an example of that. Okay, so that's the Fair Barn. They did also request to increase the holiday premium, which applies to certain days of the year. The holidays listed here, that's increasing by $50 to be consistent with what other venues charge for a holiday premium. The next one is within Parks and Recreation. You'll see this in two places, the classes and programs fee as well as the youth day camps. It's the same, the fee structure is the same, where currently it's a $10 flat kind of administrative fee plus the direct costs of the program. We are recommending increasing that flat fee from $10 to $15. That fee hasn't been, the $10 fee hasn't been revisited since 2013. And that administrative fee kind of is what's covering staff time to get people registered, the systems that are used to register for these events, managing payments.
Is there a reason it's through August 31st rather than the fiscal year? It has to do with because of the summer program?
That's to accommodate the summer camps, since those prices have already been advertised for all of summer 2024. That's the only reason we made that distinction, so that there's a clean cutoff based for the summer camp fees. And then that's the same for the youth day camps, which is primarily the summer camp, but they do have them some other days throughout the year. This was just a language update. This overnight parking fee is rarely, if ever, used, but just making it more specific. There have been requests for this, but this is making it specific that that this would only be allowed in terms of using any of the, the parking areas for
What's an
overnight
example?
parking, if there's a specific event that's approved by the village manager. I believe in the past, I've been told that it used to be used some overnight trips. Do you know, Jeff, more specifically what those were? But there used to be overnight trips that were run, and they would allow the people who were going on the overnight trip to park in one of the parking lots.
And then go
When
away.
they got on the bus, they went on their overnight trip to Charlotte or wherever, came back the next day, but they would pay that fee.
I get it.
It's not used frequently, but we wanted to leave it in case the need was there and it was appropriate. And I believe, yep, that was the last one. Let me just finish scrolling through to make sure. Yep. So, any questions?
Yeah, I've got a few for a minute. One you've already answered, the significant raising of fees for the Fair Barn. I get that, so thank you. Sounds wise. Do you have data on what amounts of money we collect from fees and charges broken out by department or program? So if you hit a button, you can come up with what we took in last year?
Yes, so the primary areas in our budget where these fees and charges come into play in terms of the revenue, where you'll see them, the golf cart stickers, which is several $1,000s a year, that's not very significant. The permits and fees revenue section, if you wanted to look in the SOP book or the audit, not all of the fees are based off of this schedule. Like this year, for example, we have the US Open license fee included in our fees budget, but that is not based on this schedule. There are some revenues within these categories where it is based off of a separate contractual agreement, not the fees and charges schedule. And within sales and service revenues is the other big area. That's where we have the harness track, the Fair Barn.
So what is the total amount
Yep,
that shows
so
up at the end?
the total from FY '23 of revenues based off of fees from this schedule was $1,370,543. And in our FY '24 budget, it's about $1,315,000, which is about
1.3.
5% of our total revenue budget.
Okay. Interesting. Anybody have other questions? I think I've got some others I want to think about here now that I got that.
Generic question, is this our only bite at the apple here?
Well, yeah, we adopt this for a year.
We are able to amend it if there is a need in the interim. This is the one kind of sweeping look that we take at the entire fees and charges schedule, but there are instances where a need may come up in the middle of a fiscal year. Last year, we did have 2 amendments that we made to this, one for the harness track RV parking fee, and another for the additional utility, encroachment addendum. I'm probably not using the right term for that is, but with the fiber companies coming in, we added an addendum to the normal encroachment agreement and some additional plan review fees for that work. So when things like that come up, we are able to make amendments to this.
And the reason I ask is I think parking is a major issue for downtown merchants. And I don't propose that we debate a different fee, but I would argue that a $5 or a $10 fee is zero deterrent. We ought to consider increasing those. We don't need to talk about that tonight, and I'm wondering, does it matter whether we put it off till next year? No, but if we have another bite at the apple, that's something that I might like to
I would think
see us
that we
do.
would be, we can address that separately. If it's a significant item we ought to talk about.
And
Do
I
you think so?
totally agree with that.
Is that true, Jeff? It can be addressed separately in some meeting going forward.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I would,
That needs to be far more punitive.
oh, it's got to be
Yeah.
the minimum a deterrent. I mean,
Absolutely.
So we have some issues over how we actually can enforce overtime parking, but beyond the enforcement issue, not to minimize it, we should reconsider that.
yes,
And just because it led me to this, how many precious metal dealers do we have in Pinehurst? And why do we register them, or, I'm just surprised to see that.
We did have our first instance of this, at least since Chief Webb has been here, within the last few months, a precious metals dealer has to go to the police department to file paperwork and be fingerprinted. So the state requires the police department, is my understanding, to provide that service. And these fees are sort of essentially a pass-through, because we then remit a fee to the state agency.
So the legislation requiring registration is state-level registration, but because there are costs that we have to bear in
In providing that service, yes. Yep. And because we pay a fee to the state for that registration for the.
I'm not even going to ask what a special precious metals special occasion permit is, but I'm thank you very much. Nothing further.
Yep.
other items?
I want to ask one question. Why do we charge residents for using our community center facilities?
My assumption would be because there is still a cost, right? It's wear and tear on a facility, it's staff time, it's use of the resources. It may then
Cleaning.
require extra cleaning after a program is done or someone rents the facility. Again, that's something that could be revisited if you have interest in that. But it's really it's probably a minimal fee. It's certainly not covering all of those costs. It's not intended to. But just so at least there is some contribution towards the cost of the facilities and the services that are provided and needed when the facility is used.
I think Mr. User Fee is right behind you there.
I just was going to add, in addition to what Dana was saying, it's also a matter of exclusive use. This is a public facility, and when you want to occupy it, monopolize it for your exclusive use, then you're going to pay for it. So that's why.
Other questions?
Like because we can.
Yes. That's right.
In your purview to change it if you want to make it free, but
Yeah.
yes, when you want to rent something for and make exclusive use of it for yourself, then yes, we charge a fee for that.
But we also are charging a different fee, higher fee, for non-residents.
Correct.
And
Double usually.
whatever. One of the things I know we're going to be talking about the library later, and I remember bringing this up last year. We charge no fee for people who are not residents of Pinehurst.
Correct. No one pays to have a library card or be, yeah,
But we
to
have
use the
actually
library.
a count on the number of card holders. It's over 7,000. I think it's close to 8,000. So the irony is that the Library IQ needs assessment recommended that non-residents be charged a user fee to help offset costs for the library. So we
I
will,
can address that as well.
go ahead.
With the new library, it was intended that new software would be implemented that
The
can
software you
track
told-
that.
yes.
Right now, we do not have the software that can track when they fall due, when they expire. That wasn't the way it was set up originally. The idea when the new library is opened, that there would be a clean slate started, all new library cards would be issued to residents, and non-residents would be paid
So
a fee.
it's still a technology issue.
Right now, it's a technology issue.
But how do we know the number of card holders right now?
I think they're just got the running tally is how they've got them. Now, whether that running tally is probably within the software system, but the system itself does not have the capability of saying when are they expired, and then having to backtrack and try to charge people for it is just kind of cumbersome right now. So starting with a clean slate was the idea with the new library.
We wait until the software's in place. Okay. Is there anything else that we are not charging a fee for that we ought to think about charging a fee for? Where the software isn't in the way? We've discussed the de minimis
Like a
about
long
the
council
parking
meeting
issue.
fee?
I'm just, I mean, I don't want, we can come back to that at a separate time. I'm not a fan of taxes, but I do believe in user fees and charges like that. So, is there anything we're missing that, hey, why are we not assessing a fee for X, Y, or Z, be it our residents or non-residents?
Not that I'm aware of, and from this being my first go-around with this with the department heads, I think they're all pretty well aware of what other neighboring communities are charging for, what they charge, to make sure that we're in line with that. So I would think if there was an opportunity to charge a fee that might be brought forward.
Another way to think about that is if staff was aware of another opportunity that we thought was appropriate to take advantage of, it
Yeah.
would be recommended.
Right. It's good. I would hope so. But are we, I'm wondering if we're shortchanging ourselves on the pile of manure, but well, let that go away. Jack, did you have something you wanted to say?
To get people to do that.
Yeah, I just have a couple things I noted. We charge $25 a conference room rental, and that's every conference room that we have, is that correct?
Yes, so no matter which conference room they're using, that would be the fee.
Does this count as a conference room?
No.
No, I think Assembly Hall has a
Oh,
separate
it's
fee.
assembly, yeah, different
We
rate.
charge for
But,
the,
And the lobby is a separate facility charge as well.
oh, if you just.
and so, does that include the current library, the Gibbon facility? The Eric Nelson Room?
The library does have a separate section here. I don't recall off the top of my head whether.
Audrey would know the answer to this.
Yeah.
We do not currently charge for use of the Eric Nelson Room. It has no amenities per se. Most of the council rooms are wired and have TVs and all that sort of stuff. We have a nice little room with a grandfather clock and a fireplace that, to my knowledge, has never been used. And it's quite small, and the groups are very small, so it has been considered an amenity of the library and will continue to be that way until things change.
Library may be different, obviously.
Yeah, that's true, and I expect that we will charge then, but at this point, they wouldn't get much bang for their buck other than a pretty place to sit.
Right, been there, done that. So I just noted a couple of, one is we charge for technology media, we charge, $1 per disc. how many discs do we sell? How about if do we charge for USB?
Yes, I believe that's on here as well.
I didn't note it, but anyway. Okay, and
I
do we
do
charge a
not
fee if
know
we
how much.
download files?
Not that I'm aware of. I don't know how we would.
Like
In-
public record files, you mean, or
Right.
we can't?
I know for a fact, at least my experience is that, like the Board of the Elections, if you ask for the list of voters, it used to be you had to give them $20, $25 for the disc.
It still does.
And now they will download it for free. So this is consistent with that, is that correct? Okay, the only other comment would be, are there any fees that we think, because of the size of the fee and the cost of collection, we're actually kind of, it really isn't pay to have these fees? Have you
Like parking?
Do we have any of that? Like, well, outside of parking.
They're not listed on here, but the planning and inspection, I don't think they're on here anyway. There's so much in planning and
I mean,
inspections.
the theory being we're going to recover the actual cost that we incur, additional cost that we incur because of the request.
Yep.
But are
So,
there some that are sort of nuisance and it's harder to, for the accounting and collection fee than actually how much we get?
not of anything that's on this list.
Okay, that's the right answer. Great, thank you.
Yeah, I did notice that I can't remember whereas we charge more for the permit than the inspection or vice versa. Alex, do you remember what that is, what those numbers are? I sort of enjoyed reading it. I was seeing,
In every one of those cases, the state law only allows us to recoup a fee that's commensurate with the cost of the
Cost of
service
doing
provided.
business.
So, it's been, what, like 4 years since since we did that study? So some of these things may need to be updated over time,
okay.
but it's all based on, it
Guidance.
was all based on an assessment of how much it costs for us to provide
Gotcha.
each one of those services.
So the segregation you're thinking is probably the plan review fee that would be
Yes.
associated with each of these applicable permits.
Right.
And then the actual inspection that would incur after the permit's been issued from the plan review.
Yes, that's what one, it really pops up.
Correct. Well, and again, it depends on which permit type.
All right.
And largely back 5 years ago, we went to this format instead of just an overall square footage to make sure we were, after doing that study that Jeff mentioned, the number of hours that were associated with actually doing the plan review up front, and then we would calculate the inspection based on the square footage and how many inspections would be necessitated by the permit type, and how many times an inspector actually has to go out and inspect the work before it's finalized out.
Do you know if our charges are similar to other communities for these permitting and planning stuff?
If you adopt the changes we recommended tonight, we'll be up to par with our neighboring jurisdictions
Okay.
and others, sure will.
That's all I need to know. Thanks. Other questions or thoughts here? Dr. Morgan, I see you look like you got a question.
No, I was actually going
Okay, all
to put
right.
a motion, but
Then I'll
the
enter-
thought that was running through my head that you probably read on my face was that with all the discussion on resident, non-resident, we get back to parking tickets, we need to make sure we don't do resident, non-resident, because that'd look pretty bad.
That would be, well, that's something we should discuss. All right.
All right, but I move to approve Resolution 2407, amending the fees and charges schedule for FY 2025.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
You've got a motion. Thank you.
All right. One last thing for you tonight.
Hold on, let me get that.
And then you get to see someone else's face and hear someone else's voice.
The 6 months wrap up. Okay.
Yes. So our last item are the financial statements for FY '24 through December 31st, 2023.
This is a mid-year review.
Mid-year, yep. So this is just mid-year looking at budget to actuals as of December 31st. At the next meeting, I'm also working on the actual mid-year budget amendment, which is very much informed by, our actuals through December 31st, plus anything else that we kind of know up to this point. But
That would be an amendment to move some funds.
correct. So
based
that would
on what we
be-
know.
Yep, that will come with a recommended kind of, again, kind of an overall look, relook at our budget
I get it.
and making some amendments, but it's very much informed by our actuals through December 31st. So just looking overall, let me zoom this in for you. At our budget to actuals, we're in good shape midway through the year, on target to meet our budget for sure.
Okay, go ahead. I'm going to have a question before we move on from this slide.
Yep, so revenues are ahead of our year-to-date budget, which is just our, estimate of the budget through December. Revenues are ahead by $785,000. Operating expenditures are below budget by about just under $2 million. About half of that is in salaries and benefits. And our capital outlays are about $1.4 million below the budget. When comparing to December of last fiscal year, we are 1.7 million ahead in revenues. We have 1.7 million more in revenue at this December versus last December. We've spent about $500,000 more in operating expenditures. That's mostly salaries and benefits, which is consistent with our expectation that FY24 salaries and benefits would cost us about $1 million more than last year. And about 197 more in capital spend. So at this point in the fiscal year, we typically have a very, very high increase in fund balance, and that is just because of the timing of receiving all the property tax revenues in the first half of the year that are funding expenditures for the entire fiscal year.
Is that FY24 actual bottom line, is that our projection for the end of the year? What is that 28 million?
This is as of December 31st. That is our ending fund balance. So
at the
yeah,
moment.
At that point in time. Nope. So that is not a projection through the end of the fiscal year.
Okay.
Is that a function that expenses are just lagging and we expect they will catch up?
Correct. It's because expenditures are relatively smooth throughout the fiscal year, but our revenues, 50% of our budget are the property taxes, and we collect the VAT, 90-some% of them by December. So our revenues are very front-loaded in the actuals, where the expenditures are, pretty smoothly spent throughout the fiscal year. So that's the reason for that very large change in fund balance right now.
But is this, for some reason, did taxes come in earlier this year than in the past?
Nope.
To what would you attribute the significant increase in revenues over expectation?
So our expectation, we're about 700,000 over, and we'll look at that in an additional slide. It is a combination of the property taxes, the sales taxes, and investment income. As far as what this 785,000 that we're above where we thought we'd be in the budget. Do you mean year over year?
Understand that sales taxes, the property taxes are lumpy, but they tend to come in, I assume, in January.
A portion does, yes. And actually, we just got our sales
We get
tax.
them on a little bit of a delay basis, but it seems like that is a larger divergence from normal, and I'm just wondering if there's anything that, the investment, the interest income I would get because interest on cash deposits lagged the rise in interest rates, but people are paying fancy prices now to hold cash.
So if I'm understanding your question correctly, I'm thinking as far as why our revenues are, 1.7 million more than last
Right.
year, about 1.1, 1.2 of that is the higher tax revenue based on the tax rate that was approved.
Which was
Property tax.
adjusting for
tax
the increase in valuation.
that-
It was
yeah,
not a
that's-
revenue neutral tax rate.
No, it was not. It was the-
Right, okay.
Correct, yeah, after the revaluation, yes.
Thank you. I think
Yeah.
that's the answer.
I'm
So-
sorry, I was not understanding your question at first.
One question, remind me when the sales tax revenues are remitted to us? Quarterly, monthly?
We get a payment monthly, but they're on a lag. Basically like a 2 to 3 month lag, depending on whether you're looking at the month that the consumer purchased the item or the month that the vendor who sold it remitted the sales tax to the state. So,
Is there a regular pattern that we do
Yes.
receive a check or deposit every
yes.
month?
Yep, we get a payment every month,
With
but
lags.
these actuals, as of December 31st, we had only received actual payments through October's sales tax essentially, so our November and December amounts that are in the revenue are our estimates of, based on what we had budgeted. So those are always lagging in terms of the actuals there.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
Yep. So this is more just a graphical representation of the same information. But you can see, so the narrow bar in each of them represents our revenues and other financing sources. So, you know, where's the money coming from? And then the wider bar represents all the expenditures, you know, where it's going. In FY24, we did have a budgeted, the reason the revenue bar is lower than the expenditure bar, we did have a planned fund balance appropriation in the budget for FY24. But when we look at the actuals, this is where you're seeing our revenues are way ahead of our expenditures, but that is pretty consistent with what we experienced last year and in previous years, just because of that timing of the tax receipts. But you can see we have earned more revenue than last year, and our expenditures are more than last year again, primarily driven by the salaries and benefits increases in this fiscal year versus last year.
There's I'll wait till we get it. It's another chart.
Okay, yeah, but basically, as we were discussing before, you'll see this gap between the revenues and expenditures keep closing as we move through the fiscal year, and the expenditure timing catches up.
And other sources won't kick in till later then?
So this other sources, last year in FY23, that was the ARPA funding that was budgeted. This year, we don't really have many other financing sources. I think there's an amount for the subscription liabilities being issued. That's it. So there's just significantly less. There's a teeny tiny little yellow bar there.
Okay.
It's just very hard to see. Okay, so moving on to the revenues. This is just comparing our annual budget, year-to-date budget, and actuals last year and in FY24 to date. So this is where you can see, again, revenues, pretty consistent trend in terms of where we're at overall compared to the budget.
I meant to look it up before I came tonight, but I didn't. I kept thinking that our budget for FY24 was, quote, like 26.7 or 26.9. I guess it was 26.2?
3.
3? Well, I'm rounding, you're rounding, yes. Well, I guess I just forgot.
But there have been a couple other one-off amendments to the budget. For example, the GASB 96 subscriptions budget amendment added to the other financing sources, which changed the revenue budget. So you are correct. These dollars are not what was originally approved in the SOP.
So originally, it might have been 26.7 was my number. Okay. I feel better. Thank you.
So there have been some changes already for specific budget amendments.
Yeah, I get it.
And this, on that note, the 26, because I think you're right, it was like 26.7 or 26.9, but that, this number excludes the fund balance appropriation as well. So that the original SOP budget had a $600,000 fund balance appropriation. All right, so now we'll look at more specifically some of the noteworthy revenues. So we collected about $12.3 million in property taxes. That's the real and personal property taxes plus the motor vehicles. The next slide, we'll look at the real and personal property taxes a little more closely. We're at about 92% of the annual budget collected compared to 93.6% through the second quarter last year. And in looking at that differential and in preparation for doing the mid-year amendment, our budget for the real and personal property taxes is higher than what I expect that we will collect. So that will be one of the amendments that I recommend next meeting, but we can look at that more closely in the next slide. The sales and use taxes, we collected nearly 4.2 million through the second quarter, which is about 5.7% growth from last year. Our budget's based on 5% growth. So far we're on track with that. The latest NCLM report and other reports that I get monthly regarding the sales taxes are showing that at least overall statewide, sales tax growth is slowing to, in some places, either negative or others down to 1%, 2%, 3%. So over the next few months, we'll see how that pans out for us here. I think hopefully with our tourism base, we may not see as much of a decline within Moore County as some of the other counties are seeing. We're usually in the upper half in terms of the growth. And our investment income, interest rates are still over 5%, and that's what our portfolio is earning in the Capital Management Trust. So we are well above our investment income budget, which was based on a conservative 3% growth for the year. And based on the latest interest rate projections from the Federal Reserve, it looks like it will stay above 5% at least through the end of FY24 for us. So this is a closer look at just our current year levy for the real and personal property taxes. So this is where you can see our budget for the current year is just under 13 million. The actual levy per the county, which is basically fixed at this point, is about 12.9 million. The fact that the budget is higher is what's driving that collection percentage to be lower than in previous years, which usually are around 93% through December. So making that budget adjustment will kind of bring that back into line. In terms of collections, we are, on track with the amount that's levied at this point in terms of collections. It's not like collections are falling behind.
So we don't expect to collect too much more.
We expect to collect about 12.9 million based on our
Total.
Historical collection rates.
But we've
yes.
already collected 11.9.
We've already collected 11.9, yep, and in January, we're getting another almost 900,000. Yep, so we're on track in terms of collections based on this actual levy of 12.9 million. Our budget was just a little overstated based on the estimates that were made of the property valuation.
We still expect, in essence, to collect every dollar that we levy.
Correct. Yeah, I wanted to show this so that it's kind of illustrate that it's really just the budget being a little too high that is driving that percentage down. Our actual collections are consistent with where we have always been in that above 99.9%. We're still tracking with prior year collection rates based on the actual levy, which is what really matters at the end of the day. It's not like all of a sudden our taxpayers aren't paying their taxes. That is not the problem. Okay, moving on to the operating expenditures. Again, here you can see where our operating expenditure budget is considerably higher compared to last year, primarily driven by the salaries and benefits. And our actual spending, about $500,000 more through December compared to last year. Our personnel expenditures, we have about 1.1 million through December of our personnel budget that was not spent. This is really driven primarily by the lapsed salary in the police and fire departments, which has been kind of the consistent driver for that. And if you don't have the salaries, then you're not paying the FICA, you're not paying the retirement expense, the insurance, the health benefits. So that kind of all starts to compound.
So our 6-month budget projection for what your M&M or SM
Million,
it was
yep.
7.8.
Yes, so based on the budget, we were expecting to spend 7.8. We've only spent 6.7. Yep. And outside some non-personnel, we have that kind of unspent balance through December 31st is driven by $117,000 for road patching and the downtown parking lot resurfacing project, which has been tabled for now. $200,000 for the PDO rewrite, and $74,000 that was budgeted for the multimodal plan and STR monitoring that has not been spent.
Jeff or Alex, can you remind me on the 200 grand for the PDO? What did we end up deciding about all that? Didn't we have a discussion of somewhere along that?
It's been in our plans for about 4 years now.
Well, that may be discussion. Okay, so.
And we just have not been able to make it the priority that it needed to be in order to get it done. We are there now.
Okay.
We expect to start that process this summer. Is that right, Alex? Maybe fall? Yeah.
Okay, that's what I was looking for. I couldn't remember what we talked about.
All right, and looking at capital, we did have about $1.5 million less in planned and budgeted capital expenditures this year compared to last year. Last year, we had the synthetic turf field, which was kind of a significant one-time project that we don't have something comparable this year. But our capital spending is ramping up, particularly with the sidewalk and pedestrian path projects, where we've been making a lot of progress on those, and those have been have been installed in various areas so far.
Dana, remind, the sidewalks is round numbers 400,000 a year, 450?
I think it's
450, I think.
450 this year
Or-
and for several years in the future?
I think it may be 460.
That number is in my head too, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's either 430 or 460. Between stormwater and the sidewalks, one's 430, one's 460 in capital. But it's in that ballpark. And just some of the notable capital expenditures from funds that were rolled forward from FY24. We've spent almost all of the streetscape improvement money. This is the downtown amenity plan, the trash receptacles, light bollards, et cetera, planters, the sidewalk improvements and pedestrian work. We've made good progress there. And out of the stormwater, we've spent or encumbered about half of those funds. And out of the FY24 capital projects that were planned through the second quarter, the police radios and light towers, we're just waiting on one more radio. Everything else has been spent and received, and the harness track improvements were completed in October. For our financial outlook, we are primarily a residential community. We rely very heavily on the residential property taxes. We had 29 single-family residential permits issued through December in FY24, which we only had 12 at the same time last year. And we do have 2 major subdivisions that are expected to be permitted in the remainder of the year with 78 lots, which should get us over our goal of 100 single-family residential permits for the year.
Dan, is that the D.R. Horton and also something at Pine Wild? Or where are the
those-
78?
That's Hollycrest, right?
Oh, I'm sorry, Hollycrest. Okay.
Yeah, it's Hollycrest and Pinehurst South Cottages.
These are permits, right? Because Hollycrest will not be within the Village of Pinehurst property tax bucket.
Correct.
It's an
Yeah.
ETJ.
Correct, but as far, yeah, the metric at least is just the permits, correct.
Phase 5 permitting will probably start this fall, as far as I know.
All right, and our cash and investment balances, we're up about 1.5 million from December of last year, primarily higher, higher property taxes, as well as, just other surpluses of revenues over expenditures to date. And we do maintain still about 99% of our cash and investments in the Capital Management Trust. It's earning a great yield there, so we plan to continue that investment strategy. And you can just see sort of the cash trends in terms of the balance is consistent with previous years. And just the update on the library capital project fund, really no change since last quarter other than some additional design expenditures for Oakley Collier's work. Any other questions?
I did have one. There's a line, community development line, it said it was 52%. Do you know what chart I'm referring to? And scribbled it down, I was reading it. And I was trying to understand.
Community development, in the,
It was a 52% expenditure so far this year. It was the only one, there were two items over 50%.
okay,
One was
yes.
community development, and the other was, made more sense to me. I forget what it was, like 90%, I think it was. Am I right?
Yeah,
Welcome
so
Center.
the community development budget is primarily the Welcome Center costs, so the rent and any other operating costs for the Welcome Center, which that's pretty consistent throughout the year. The other significant piece is our dues payment for the Moore County Economic Development Partnership, which I believe is like $25,000, which is, we pay in August.
Okay,
For
that
the full
explains that. And what was
annual
the item, was
subscription.
that 92% or 90-something percent, right below?
Oh, the debt service.
Debt service, that's for the renewed leases on our.
That's on
whatever
the
copiers or
leases
whatever we
and
have.
the, yep, and the subscriptions, that's just based on the timing of many of the subscriptions, at least are annual payments, so if we've already paid them for the year. Yep,
Yep, that was my question, thank you.
you're welcome.
Other questions? John, anything from you on that? Dr. Morgan? Jack? Barbara? Okay, I'll entertain a motion.
I don't
Oh,
think
there
we
isn't a
need one.
motion. We don't need a motion. You can go away. You can go away. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. Bye-bye. All right, we are on to discuss item 12. This is to discuss referral of Trotter Hills Residential Development Conditional Zoning Request back to Planning and Zoning Board. I am going to, Alex, please come forward. I was wondering where that was. Too much reading here. So would you want to open this up? And
Sure, I can make a few opening statements for this agenda item. So as council is aware, and most everyone else who are still actively listening today, the Planning and Zoning Board back in November, the regular scheduled meeting date, had a public hearing item where they reviewed and made a recommendation to this village council on a proposal for a development off Trotter Drive in the newly formed Pinehurst South Form-Based District, which was directly as a result of the Pinehurst South Small Area Plan and code implementations to the Pinehurst Development Ordinance to try to implement some of those new development standards, if you will, in the Pinehurst South area. In reviewing and holding the required public hearing and making the recommendation, the Planning and Zoning Board's findings by a vote of 5-2 were to not recommend the proposal or the site plan as submitted. And the reasoning and justification for that were a few items that were listed in that motion that cited inconsistencies with the newly adopted standards and some of the standards in the Pinehurst South Form-Based Guidance Plan. Since then, there's been increasing dialogue, a lot of it largely initiated by the applicant and owner, and recognized by village staff and I would say probably some members of the Planning and Zoning Board not actually reflect what some of their ideas or opinions would be, and some dialogue with council in general that, you know, this being the first application out of the gate with these new plans, we need some more experience and reviewing development plans such as this one with these new guidelines and requirements and figuring out what the overall vision in the area was really trying to establish now that we have something a little bit more substantial to sink our teeth into and review. So one of the options when going through and considering these type of legislative type decisions for zoning map amendments is the governing board, in this case Village Council, has the option to refer such proposals back to the Planning and Zoning Board, who Especially, I will say our board has a lot more experience and did a lot of heavy lifting to get these form-based guidance plans and these PDO amendments adopted. And therefore may be more appropriate to work with village staff and the applicant to revise a plan and work more collaboratively to have something that we believe and the Planning and Zoning Board could support that is more in keeping or consistent with those adopted standards. So because of some of the recent discussions and dialogue, staff felt that it was prudent to put this item on the agenda where the village council can discuss this opportunity to refer this proposal back to the Planning and Zoning Board and have a motion on the table and an action by the village council so that some collaborative efforts can ultimately begin with the Planning and Zoning Board, village staff, and the applicant.
I have one question. What action are you looking for, if any, from us tonight?
Just an official motion and vote by the village council saying we recognize, again, some of these variables, if you will, with such a plan and implementing new codes and regulations, which also require a little bit extra effort, if you will, than maybe which was initially brushed over back in November, and therefore give direction to the Planning and Zoning Board to reconsider a revised submission before forwarding another recommendation to village council.
But we don't have a submission before us.
Correct.
Okay. What I was going to ask is that we may not have a submission before us, but we do have a former member of the Planning and Zoning Board sitting at this table. And so I was going to ask him if he'd like to opine a little and help us as we consider our next steps.
I think just about everybody on the Planning and Zoning Board and the Planning Department was and are excited to find a way to implement what we've spent so many years developing, these form-based codes which reflect hopefully the vision of the small area plans which the council approved. And so we are anxious, I think we were, and I think the council is anxious to see some development in this area that, that brings that to fruition, okay? And I don't think we should dismiss out of hand any opportunity to explore alternatives that can in fact accomplish that mission. This is a little unusual. I don't know of any precedent that I know that I've seen this done before, but I think it's the right thing to do. I don't think, and you can help me if I'm wrong here, I do not think we're asking the Planning and Zoning Board to review the same proposal again. I don't believe that's the case. Is that correct?
That's correct. The intent for this is to open more avenues and opportunities for the Planning and Zoning Board and village staff to work more collaboratively with the applicant on a revised plan and provide feedback and work through what we believe might be more pertinent or what standards are working in this specific instance now that we have a site-specific development plan for the area, and have a revised submittal that can then start back through the channels and ultimately come to village council for their consideration.
And hopefully, any revisions would not be such that would require going back to square one, the whole process of site plan, the technical review and so forth. It would be hopefully something that the planning department would say, this is a modification that we feel comfortable that can be submitted, move on to the next step, which is council hearing, as a matter of fact. Is that
Which is another intent for the agenda item tonight. It authorizes that collaborative work, but also there again allows for something to be revised, but not such that it triggers a whole new application.
Right, and that's for everyone's benefit, actually, I think, believe. So it's a little unusual, but I support this. I think this is the right thing to do, and I'm anxious to see something happen in here that we feel comfortable that accomplishes the vision that's been put forward in the small area plans, and and to a great extent meets the requirements of our PDO. I think that's, those criteria hopefully can be met.
I do know that Dr. Morgan and myself spent a full 2 years going through the process, so we're certainly familiar with it, and I think whoever said it, you're right, this is sort of the maiden voyage of a recommendation under the small area plans and the guidelines that we adopted. So I'll ask council members if anyone else would like to speak first. No?
I fully agree with Jack on this. I think it is new ground we're covering, new ocean we're getting into. Everyone look at that. And I think the idea of working with a applicant on this, not starting from square one, and to have our staff help with the feedback and things like that is going to help us all. So
Okay.
I fully support this.
John, you have comments?
I think I also agree with Jack, but two questions. If you were not requesting this step, would there be an action item for council to take?
So the typical process is after a recommendation has been forwarded to the governing board by the local planning board, then the governing board, or at least 30 days after the scheduled hearing, the action or the item can be taken up by the local governing board, and it would be up to the applicant if they cared to make any changes based on that initial hearing with the planning and zoning board and what the recommendation was, unless the applicant decided to formally withdraw such request. So we've kind of been in a standstill, if you will, kind of awaiting what the next steps may be. And a lot of this, again, has been initiated by the applicant kind of seeking an opportunity to have more substantial feedback in order to make some necessary revisions to the plan. And so that would be, again, the reasoning behind this step, again, being maybe uncommon, but it's certainly authorized, and many jurisdictions take that opportunity.
But sharpening my question then, there would not be an agenda item asking us to overrule planning and zoning and the ruling that they made?
That would, with this item, no, that would not be an agenda item moving to council, no.
Yes, I think if I draw an analogy to things I'm familiar with, which is when a proposal came to historic preservation that we were not going to approve, then the normal step was to ask that they go back and work with staff on how they might, having heard the objections of HPC, how they might amend without going back through square one. And I think that's what you're proposing. So I think that's in the nature of how we ought to be regulating, which is to say that it's not a black and white yes or no. If we're not ready to approve, or we said no, then how can we work to make it more acceptable without predicting what the outcome of that would be? So yes, I support this.
Barb, comments? Okay. I have no other questions or comments. I'll entertain I guess we sort of have a motion, right?
I move to refer the Trotter Hills Residential Development Conditional Zoning Request back to the Planning and Zoning Board for collaborative work on project design and conditions and reconsideration of the resulting updated request.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
So adopted. Thank you. We are on to other business. I have one question. I see Jeff Batten, or maybe Jeff Sanborn knows the answer. There's a sidewalk upgrade, I'll call it for lack of a better word, along Maple Road in Dundee. It looks great. I'm just, the progress and all. What is the composite that'll be down there in the end?
Oh, what's the material?
Yes,
Oh, it's the Chapel Hill grit that we're using in other areas as well.
the Chapel Hill. Okay, that's what so it's similar to what's on Fields?
Yes,
Okay.
And I think it's on Cherokee, going
Mackenzie,
down to Palmetto. And
it is, and it's on
Yeah.
Mackenzie as well.
Okay, great, thank you. That was my only other business. I'll entertain any other questions or comments on other business from members of the council? No, okay,
I would issue a mea culpa.
go ahead.
There's some member of the public with whom I had a conversation since our last meeting, and I swore that I would bring up an issue that they said, and I grabbed the wrong folder at home, and so I don't have that in front of me. So if you're out there listening, you have to contact me again, and I swear I will bring it up at the next meeting.
Boy, it's
Don't remember what it was. I apologize.
a full
Forever be on YouTube.
full confession. Okay, we're now going on to the public comments period. Comments from attendees. We have one individual who has signed up, Mr. John Webster. And if anyone who has not signed up yet would like to sign up and come forward, when he is through, please do. Mr. Webster,
John Webster, 140 Mackenzie Road.
please speak into the mic a little clearer.
Okay. You've been presented with a staff memo and PowerPoint presentation which advocate for a large library. These are surprising in their advocacy rather than an attempt to convey a neutral stance. In particular, I would ask you to question the following with regard to these documents. The first is the affirmation that the village must update or replace the existing archives and library. In fact, the village entered an obligation to keep the library and archives for 15 years. Secondly, the affirmation that the village council can confidently conclude that the residents want an expanded public library in Pinehurst. The 2020 survey on the library, which once again was a survey that skirted the most obvious question, in this case about whether taxpayers wish to finance an expanded library and archive. This one registered 66% of respondents agreeing that the library met the needs of Pinehurst residents, i.e. a majority for keeping things as they are. Third, the same survey questioned taxpayers on how much taxation they were willing to agree to support for the cost of an ongoing library operation, i.e. operational expenses, and the answer was just a shy of $400,000. The Southern Pines Library, which does not have a separate archive to house and manage, costs $1 million per annum. Every time this subject has been discussed, the price tag has gone up. The staff recommendation is now $7 to $8 million, and this just covers the new building expenditure. Where is the cost for fixtures, fittings, furniture, reading materials, etc.? And do these amounts include what has already been spent? Fifth, since when is the financial year surplus assumed to be dedicated to the library? As the PowerPoint does with the financial year 23 $1.7 million surplus. Pretending that funds allocated from the village's various funds are somewhat free and do not cost the taxpayers is disingenuous. These funds come from taxpayers who have been excessively charged in prior years, and at a minimum, they have an opportunity cost in terms of lower taxes or projected or delayed, or projects delayed or foregone. What is the value of the land which is proposed to be allocated to this project? I have prepared my own analysis of what it would cost taxpayers if we were to have to finance the entire estimated capital expenditure as currently estimated, and assume also that the Southern Pines Library operating expenditure of $1 million is included, and this comes to $1.9 million per annum for 15 years, or the equivalent of a 14% property tax increase. So I ask you to, one, consider keeping the library in its current location with a square footage not very different to the Oakley Collier recommendation, whether it's 9,038 or 9,250 feet square. I've seen both in the PowerPoint presentation. The library is a service to residents, whereas the archive is mostly for outside or one-time visitors. And the priority in terms of location should therefore suit those residents who are recurring visitors. Secondly, find an alternative location for the archive, while also seeking collaborative agreements with the USGA, the resort, or whoever, to house part of the archive. And thirdly, consider asking the tax-paying population clear and direct questions about how much money they are willing to spend on a new library archive, and then please listen to what they say before embarking on what could be the village's most expensive capital expenditure project to date. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Webster. Yep. Thank you. Do you have something you're? Okay. You leave it with the clerk. she can share it with the council. Is there anybody else who would like to speak? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn for about 10 minutes.
I move to adjourn the regular meeting.
Second.
Okay, we're adjourned. We'll regather